A setting so iconic, it doesn't even need an introduction, partially because I couldn't think of one. Being one of the main locations in the first ever Star Wars movie, the Death Star solidified itself as one of the most iconic weapons in movie history. So iconic in fact that it was used again 2 years later to conclude the very same trilogy it started. With the Death Star being such an iconic location, it was only a matter of time before it were to be added to EA's Star Wars Battlefront as a brand new DLC. Releasing on September 20th, 2016. Upon release, this DLC received a ton of criticism, mainly due to the lack of content compared to the previous 2 DLCs. Only 5 game modes were available in the DLC, with only one classified as a large-scale game mode, upsetting many who had gotten used to the massive battlefields on Cloud City. While there was a lack of content, the DLC mainly aimed to test the waters of what had not been done, and aimed to add brand new mechanics to the game. This DLC included 5 maps, 3 taking place on the Death Star, with the other 2 taking place outside the Death Star, being the first Fighter Squadron maps to be set in space. 2 new blasters were added with the unique feature of having a secondary fire, alongside 2 new star cards, 1 game mode, 3 new heroes, and 2 brand new starfighters. In terms of free content, there was not much. The rank cap was again raised from 70 to 90, with new skins available for unlock. The Death Star Trooper, Rebel Pilot, Imperial Officer, and Rebel Officer were all added to the game, but most notably of all, the helmetless Stormtroopers were removed from the game. It's a lot of content, so why don't we take a closer look. As previously mentioned, 2 new weapons were added to the game, both with a brand new secondary fire feature. We'll start off with the better of the 2, and one of my favorite blasters in the game, the TL-50. This heavy blaster features triple barrels and a secondary fire option that, when charged, will release a concussion blast that can perform one-hit kills within a small radius, while severely damaging other players around the area of the impact. This ability makes it the first and only heavy blaster to do so. It deals 15 to 11 damage with a rate of fire of 700 rounds per minute. It has a low damage from its primary blaster function, but the triple barrels and high rate of fire make up for it, making it able to kill an enemy exceptionally quickly. Damage drop-off begins at 10 meters and ends at 50, meaning that the primary fire is much more effective at closer ranges. This weapon is already amazing due to the high rate of fire, but what makes it stand out is that secondary fire. It charges up fairly quickly and is incredibly powerful, especially if the enemy does not have a health buff. The best strategy for this weapon is to always get high ground, as you can spam the secondary fire at all enemies below. Another solid strategy is to combine the TL-50 with a jump pack and the bounty hunter trait, which will decrease your cooldowns drastically. This means you will constantly be able to fly around and use the secondary fire, which not only leads to a ton of kills, but is also extremely fun to do. This is easily one of the best blasters in the game and is definitely better than its Battlefront 2 version. Unlocking this weapon will cost you 3,500 credits, it requires 20 kills as an Imperial soldier, 75 heavy blaster kills, and 1 win from the DLC game mode battle station. The second DLC weapon is the K-16 Briar Pistol, which is the same gun Cassian uses in the Andor show. It deals 25 to 12 damage with a fairly slow rate of fire of 280 rounds per minute. Its secondary fire is fairly different from the TL-50's, traveling in a straight line and performing a one-hit kill against enemies. Although it does sound overpowered as hell, there is no lock-on feature, meaning you need to line up the shot exactly with the target. Damage drop-off with this blaster begins at 25 meters and ends at 40, making this pistol fairly underwhelming. Although the secondary fire is deadly, this pistol is only useful if you can sneak up on your enemies with the secondary fire, as its normal fire is slow and weak. Unlocking this weapon will cost you 3,500 credits, requiring 10 kills with a blaster pistol, 25 kills as Han Solo for some reason, and 3 blaster pistol streaks. The TL-50 is easily the better of the 2, being one of the more popular blasters in the game. This update gave us 2 brand new star cards, less than any DLC beforehand, which kind of summarizes the whole complaint behind this DLC. We will start off with the laser trip mine, which is a fairly handy trap. When placed down, it will emit a long blue laser, which upon making impact with, will detonate instantly killing you. The trip mine is great to place down in hallways or doorways where lots of enemies will travel by, as it's active until detonated or destroyed. There are two ways to detonate a trip mine. The conventional way is for an enemy to walk through a laser, which activates it and kills the enemy. A lesser known strat is to place it where you have a line of sight and to manually detonate it by shooting it, which can also be used to destroy an enemy trip mine. A good tactic for placing the trip mine is to crouch down and place the mine as low as possible. This way your enemy is less likely to see it. You can also place it around the corner, killing any naive soldier who isn't careful enough to check corners. Another great feature is that the trip mine will also scramble enemy radars, making it even more useful around objectives. Unlocking this card costs 3,500 credits and requires you to get 10 explosive kills and get 20 kills when playing with the scout trait. The upgraded version of this card costs 8,000 credits and requires you to get 5 kills with the laser trip mine, along with achieving 50 explosive kills. The other of the 2 star cards included in this DLC is the medical droid, who unfortunately does not come alongside his best friend, the ammo droid. Unlike all the other droids in the game, whose main goal is to try to kill you, the medical droid aims to heal you during combat. They grant players 30% health every 3 seconds as players enroll in combat. Players must be careful, however, as the medical droid can be easily destroyed with 1 or 2 hits, depending on the weapon. Keeping it in a corner or out of range of enemies is recommended. The medical droid offers the same health boost that the back-to-bomb does, making the max health 130. Both the medical droid and back-to-bomb act in almost the same ways, with the only difference being that the medical droid will constantly heal teammates when placed down. This card is definitely underrated and slept on, as placing it down while defending an objective can oftentimes save your team when they're on the verge of collapsing. Unlocking this card costs 3,500 credits, requiring you to heal 10 team members, along with reaching level 3 on the survivalist trait. The upgraded card costs 8,000 credits and requires you to heal 20 teammates and get 1,500 objective score in Battle Station. While both star cards are good, they are incredibly underwhelming compared to previous star cards in the other DLCs and are quite honestly a weak addition to the DLC. If weapons were the highlight of the Outer Rim DLC, the maps of the Bespin DLC, then the new game mode is certainly the highlight of this DLC, Battle Station. A new 3-phase game mode in which rebels attempt to destroy an Imperial Star Destroyer in order to participate in an assault on the Death Star in hopes of rescuing R2-D2 before, finally, attempting to destroy the Death Star itself. The first stage involves taking down an Imperial Star Destroyer in an asteroid field. The rebels must destroy enough Imperial fighters to allow them to call in a wiring strike, dropping the Star Destroyer's shields and allowing the rebels to attack the weak points. Both sides are able to be assisted by Boba Fett's Slave 1 and Han Solo's Millennium Falcon, with the Falcon being a great factor in destroying the shield generators. There are also multiple power-ups found around the map that will spawn 2 ships that act as AI wingmen. For the Empire, these are TIE Defender and TIE Bomber power-ups, and the Y-Wing and B-Wing power-ups for the Rebels. I think these power-ups are great inclusions to the mode, as they add a little bit more life to what many find to be the most stale part of the game mode. In the second stage, the rebels have to extract R2-D2 from the Death Star. The first rebel player to interact with R2 will be able to play as him and must use his unique abilities as well as the aid of the other rebels to escape. The Empire must guard R2-D2 and prevent the rebels from getting him to the extraction point. During this stage, 3 hero pickups will appear, which can be used by both the rebels and Imperials to protect or stop R2. R2 is one of the more outlandish heroes in the history of Battlefront, being the only playable astromech droid across all Battlefront titles. If R2's 500 health runs out, he is stunned and the player controlling him must mash a button to regain control of him. If a stormtrooper interacts with him before he can regain control, the player will be forced out of R2 and he must be interacted with again in order to continue moving. His abilities include a scan pulse, which reveals enemies to his teammates, disruption, which instantly overheats enemies' blasters in a large radius, and my personal favorite, smoke cover, where R2-D2 becomes a vapist and proceeds to toke through the entire Death Star. Once R2 is rescued, the spawns will flip, which means that if R2 is instantly recaptured by the Empire, the rebels will be killed in spawn non-stop by the Empire, who will have heroes by now. The third stage is the trench run on the Death Star, which is my personal favorite stage. 3 rebel players are randomly chosen to perform the trench run and must fly through a series of checkpoints in order to reach the exhaust port and destroy the Death Star, while the rebels must defend the trench runners from Imperial fighters. The Empire must prevent the trench runners from reaching the checkpoints. If the trench runners are all killed, another 3 rebels will be randomly chosen to replace them. If the rebels manage to blow up the Death Star, it will show the torpedo entering the exhaust port and the battle station exploding. Both sides have hero pickups available, with the rebels being able to call in Luke Skywalker's Red 5 for backup, while the Empire is able to request Darth Vader's TIE Advanced. This entire game mode feels like a movie and is extremely fun to play, with the trench run being one of the most memorable experiences I had playing this game, but we'll talk more about that later. 3 other game modes are included in this DLC, being Cargo, Droid Run, Blast, and Fighter Squadron, all fairly mundane game modes compared to the chaos that is Battle Station. This DLC explores the interior of the Death Star primarily, giving us 3 different maps on the Death Star, although they are all fairly identical, those being the Defense Sector, Power Sector, and Command Sector. Key features from each map include the Prison Sector, where R2 is kept in Battle Station, the Tractor Beams, which Obi-Wan disabled in A New Hope, and a Trash Compactor, similar to the one that Luke was trapped in A New Hope. The Death Star is extremely close quarters, with close-range heavy blasters excelling and star cards like the Jump Pack essentially being useless. The TL-50 is great on this map, with the secondary fire being a great tool to use against players hiding behind a wall. The Trip Mine is also incredible in this DLC, with all the narrow hallways practically begging you to place it down there. There are 2 space maps included as well, the Imperial Blockade and Death Star Surface. The Blockade is fairly basic, with a large destroyer in the center of the map surrounding by an asteroid field. The Surface, however, is arguably the best map of the DLC, as it allows you to fly through the trenches of the Death Star just like Luke in A New Hope. Flying inside the Death Star requires a lot of skill to expertly fly through, with so many narrow tunnels and sharp edges barely large enough for your own ship. Although it is a starfighter map, which is already a turnoff for most players, this is probably one of the most creative and most immersive maps in the entire game, let alone the DLC. While this DLC did give us less of everything else, it gives us 4 brand new heroes more than any other update. Let's start off with the important ones, Bossk and Chewie. Health-wise, Bossk is one of the weaker heroes in the game, built with 1000 HP. His weapon of choice was his Relby V10 targeting rifle, which is extremely powerful. It deals 38 to 26 damage and being semi-automatic, has a max rate of fire of 350 rounds per minute. His hero trait is incredible, being one of the most overpowered traits in the game. Bossk is allowed to gain health per each kill. The more kills you get in a short period of time, the more health you get. At trait level 3, you are able to regenerate a massive 7% of your health back per kill, translating to 70 health points. This makes a good Bossk player virtually unkillable, as he will constantly be able to bring his health back by getting kills. His left ability is his micro grenades, which lets Bossk fire dozens of grenades from his Relby at enemies. Hitting an enemy results in a kill, while hitting the floor or bouncing off a wall will cause them to explode after a short period of time. These grenades are great to fire into an objective or overwhelm a large group of rebels with. His right ability is Toxic Escape. Bossk drops a Dioxis grenade and then launches in whichever direction the player steers him. Unlike regular Dioxis grenades, this one is much more powerful and can take a lot of health away at a quick pace. He will also regain health per each soldier that dies. This ability is probably the best, killing enemies extremely quickly and gaining health back from it. His final ability is Predatory Instincts, which allows Bossk to see all heat movements around the map. But that's not all. When having the ability toggled on, Bossk has increased melee damage, increased blaster damage, increased sprint speed, and reduced ability cooldowns. The only downside of this ability is blinding grenades such as the Flash Grenade and Sonic Imploder will blind him for longer. This ability has no cooldown and can be toggled on and off at any time. Bossk is easily the best hero in Battlefront 2015, and it isn't even a contest. Apart from his low health pool, Bossk has no weaknesses at all. Unreal. So far, Battlefront has been absolutely visually stunning, with every single alien species looking very detailed and realistic. So let's see how DICE does on the first Wookiee added to the game. Oh yeah, that's not good. Introducing Chewbacca. Chewie comes into the game with the second highest health pool in the game, with a staggering 1,550 HP. His main weapon, of course, is his bowcaster, which is probably the best gun in the game. The main bolt from his bowcaster deals 45 to 25 damage, with an additional 38 explosive damage. Any additional bolt fired from his bowcaster will deal 25 damage with 20 explosive damage. This bowcaster is as overpowered as it sounds, effortlessly killing stormtroopers while draining villains' health. His bowcaster rate of fire is 120 rounds per minute, with damage drop-off beginning at 30 meters and ending at 60. His passive ability is called Furious Firing, which amps up his bowcaster by adding more bolts for each kill. He is given 1 additional bolt at trait level 1, 2 bolts at level 2, and 3 at the final level. His left ability is called Multi-Bolts. Chewbacca's bowcaster enables the ability to double the amount of bolts he was shooting for a limited time. For example, if Chewbacca at the given time has 4 bowcaster bolts, when this ability is activated, it will double, giving him 8. Chewbacca's bowcaster will initially fire 1 bolt, so the ability will make it fire 2. This, in my opinion, is his best ability. The sheer carnage that this ability causes is enough to completely stop the play of the game and kill dozens of stormtroopers. His right ability is called Ground Slam. Chewie releases a Ground Slam which causes enemy players to die within his radius upon impact and stuns villains. The animation is very slow, but the ability is more than capable of doing its job. One great thing about this ability is that anyone in the radius will be killed regardless on elevation, meaning enemies using a jump pack will not be able to escape their fate. His middle ability is called Mighty Roar. Upon activation, Chewie leaves a loud roar that gives players around his radius an increased armor rating, suppressing enemy fire, as well as actively granting him the effects of Berserker trait rank 3, giving a 50% blaster damage bonus while hip firing. All of Chewbacca's abilities are extremely deadly and make him a force to be reckoned with. Thankfully, DICE did do some balancing in order to ensure that Chewbacca wouldn't completely break the game and gave him the same pace as Olivier Giroux. Chewie is very large, clunky, and slow to play with, but given his weapon set, it's extremely reasonable. Both Bossk and Chewie are some of the most popular heroes in the game, with Bossk being chosen at least once every 2 games of Walker Assault in my experience. 2 other heroes were added to the game, them being Hero Starfighters, Luke's Red 5 and Darth Vader's TIE Advanced. Starting with Red 5, it possesses 3 abilities, them being a shield, vehicle repair, and proton torpedo. As soon as Red 5 arrives on the battlefield, 2 players are able to spawn in as wingmen for Luke Skywalker, playing as Red 2 and Red 3. Which are stronger versions of the X-Wings piloted by Biggs Darklighter and Wedge Antilles. Vader's TIE Advanced also has 3 abilities, them being a shield, speed boost, and rapid fire. Once Vader flies in, he too is able to be flanked by 2 aces, Victor 2 and Victor 3. I quite honestly do not mind these 2 heroes' inclusions in the game. Fighter Squadron barely got any updates and was neglected for so long, so the inclusions of Luke and Vader does help one of the more underwhelming modes out. While the Death Star DLC did give us brand new and very unique content, the amount of content players received from this update was not even close to what they had received in the past. Many players were disappointed with the Death Star DLC, with it often being ranked as the worst DLC added to the game. Despite this, there were still many positives. Both Chewbacca and Bossk are incredible heroes, and probably the best DLC heroes in the game. The Death Star itself is a great map and offers some great gunplay, and Battle Station was super immersive. DICE would learn from their mistakes with the Death Star DLC, but also develop on the positives. The next DLC content update was to be the final one and based on the upcoming Star Wars movie, Rogue One, and would compete with the Bespin DLC as the best DLC in Battlefront 2015. If y'all made it to this point in the video, 2 things. First of all, thank you for the watch time, and second, subscribe. I mean, you already watched this much, so you may as well watch the other 2 DLC videos I made. We will be concluding this series with the Scarif retrospective in some time, so be sure to stay tuned for that. That is it for me today, guys. See you all next time.